Hey guys, I'm Chris Buck and a very warm welcome to Friday Fretworks, and this week I'm going to be taking a look at 3 simple tricks that turned a decidedly average guitar part into a really cool one, crucially without changing a note. A few days ago, I had a chat with the brilliant Greg Koch for his podcast Chewing the Gristle. I'll stick a link down below should you want to check it out. And one of the things that we spoke about at length actually in that interview was our mutual love of Eric Clapton and how over the years his playing has evolved, changed, developed, and I guess ultimately kind of mellowed in different ways. Now, I remember a few years ago, I found an interview with Eric, which I conveniently can't put my fingers on at the moment, frustratingly, in which he spoke about missing the intensity and the fire that he had in his playing in his younger days, which I thought was really interesting. Inevitably, we all slow down as we get older. I know I play considerably less notes than when I was 20 years old. But learning when and when not to harness that intensity in your playing really has been a crucial part of my development as a musician. Now, this is something I needed to remind myself of pretty recently, actually, when recording a song called Where'd You Go? That will be on the new Cardinal Black EP. You'll be able to hear the EP and this song in its entirety very soon. Now, when we were recording the EP, the part I put down I was initially very happy with, but the more I lived with it, the more I listened to it in the car or on my headphones when I was at home, the more I grew to dislike the part and felt that it really didn't serve the song. It felt kind of at odds with the section of the track in which it lived. It's an 8-bar section at the end of the song, which is very much the climax of the track. It's all building to this increasing crescendo. So to have a part that, to me at least, kind of felt like it sucked the energy and the drive out of the track really was very much the antithesis of what I was looking for. So, after a little bit of reassessment and thought, I sat down to re-record the guitar part. And suffice to say, both myself and the band are infinitely happier with the new version. But before we delve into any of that, let's hear the 2 parts back to back. So what exactly was different, and why did the most recent version sound so much better than the earlier version? Now, before we get into it, I'm going to break this video down into 3 sections that hopefully make these pieces of advice not just applicable to this particular track, but anything you play. Firstly, choose your weapon. Now, obviously the main difference between the 2 versions are the guitars that I'm playing. The first version, I was playing my gold top Yamaha Revstar, and in the second version, I was playing my 62 Strat, although clearly it isn't just a case of one guitar being better than the other. Now, it was only when I actually switched to the Strat when I was re-recording the part that it dawned on me that prior to that, every guitar part I'd put down on that song had actually been recorded on that gold Revstar. And so to create a track or create a part that stood out and elevated the track to where I was looking to take it, it might just be a case of changing my weapon of choice. Once I made the switch from the Revstar to the Strat, it very much dictated what came next. Firstly, instead of using that sweet singing, sustaining overdrive with a textured delay, giving it a nice bed to sit on and a lush plate reverb that I used earlier in the track, he talked about using a fuzz face into a pretty driven amp, a very bright, very splashy tape delay, and an even splashier spring reverb, almost lo-fi and trashy, I guess, that was set pretty high in the mix. The result of all that was a track that also didn't need to be set so high in the mix in order to stand out, but seemed to thrive on that dynamism and that energy of the track at this particular point, instead of railing against it. really is a good example of not so much needing the best tone, so much as just needing a tone that works within the context of the song. Secondly, learn to play the hand you are dealt. One mistake I made on this was using the same attack and phrasing on those last 8 bars that I did earlier in the track. And as much as it may have worked earlier in the song, it felt like it was hampering the song's development when you put it within the context of those last 8 bars, which were an entirely different ballgame. Now, something I learned fairly early on in my development as a musician is that playing in time isn't simply a case of being right or wrong. There are, of course, shades of grey. If you take a drummer like Stuart Copeland, who, for the vast majority of the Police back catalogue, sat very much on the front end of the beat, giving it that pointed groove that you associate with tracks like Don't Stand So Close to Me. Comparatively, if you take a drummer like Free Simon Kirke, Simon would sit very much towards the back end of the beat, which of course within the context of a classic rock band gave it that sleazy, slightly lazy, groovy feel that you associate with a track like Fire and Water. Both are perfectly in time, but both sit on totally different ends on the beat. For the first pass I took at the riff, I very much sat towards the back end of the beat, which to be honest is something I do quite a lot, but clearly within the context of this track it wasn't working and felt like it was railing against that sense of kind of scream if you want to go faster, which had been building to those last 8 bars. By comparison, when I re-recorded it on the Strat, I made a very conscious effort of being on the front end of the beat, which helped or gave aid, I guess, to that manic, slightly frenzied feel that I wanted it to have. Couple that with the Lindsey Buckingham vibrato, especially on those last few notes. All of it gave that sense that it was building and not dragging its feet. Knowing where to place yourself in relation to the beat is absolutely integral to making sure that your guitar part works and not that it doesn't fit within the song. For this next example, I'm going to play you a clip from Paul David's solo challenge that I did last year, where you can hear that I very clearly make a conscious decision to sit towards the back end of the beat, which for this particular track I thought really fitted the vibe. And lastly, pick your notes wisely. Something I said at the start of this video is that technically, across the 2 versions, I didn't actually play any different notes, only where I played them. Now, you may have noticed on the first version, under the last 4 bars, there was a harmony guitar part that came in. I knew I wanted something to give some sense of development to those last 4 bars, and at the time, a harmony guitar part seemed like quite a good idea. It's something I employed on the end of Tell Me How It Feels, if you're familiar with that. However, in hindsight, it felt very much premeditated, which was at odds with the extemporaneous vibe of the track, which very much just feels like a band in a room jamming out and having fun, which is precisely what it was. When it came to re-recording the solo, I tried a few different ideas initially, but eventually settled on just going up the octave, playing the same notes in a higher register. It's a fairly simple solution and is as old as time itself, but is incredibly effective in more cases than not, to be honest. It leads the listener's ear into there being a sense of progression or development or evolution, whilst at the time not really kind of involving too much thought as to where you need to go. It's just a very neat, very tidy answer to an otherwise complex problem. And there you have it. I hope that was of some use to you. Now, to be honest, this is the kind of thing that I don't really consciously think about very frequently until scenarios like this, when you're trying to determine why the notes that you know are right are sounding all kinds of wrong. And in this case, it was just a case of changing the intensity of which I played them. I'm going to play you out now with a track which I guess you could say came down on the slightly more intense side of the fence. As ever, I'm Chris Buck. Thank you very much for watching. This is Friday Fretworks. Please subscribe, hit the bell icon if you haven't already, and I shall see you next week for another episode. Cheers guys, take care, I'll see you soon.